Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me as always. I thought I'd come to you and have a little chat about everything we saw last night. Barcelona's shock Champions League exit away to Roma, and a really disappointing night for the Blaugrana. 4-1 lead to take to Italy and 3-0 losers on the night to crash out on away goals. There's plenty of talking points. There's so much to dissect, and I thought it'd be interesting to break it all down in a little video. So here we go. Well, where should we start? I guess, start with the first leg, okay? I was at Camp Nou last week in Barcelona for the first leg, and, I thought Roma played really, really well in that game. They lost 4-1, but I thought the scoreline really flattered Barcelona. There were 2 own goals, of course, in that, and I think Roma were much better than that scoreline suggested, on the night. And, I thought that they were unlucky, and I didn't think there was any way that they could turn it round in the second leg, and I think most people would have thought the same, but I was wrong. We were wrong. That's the beauty of football. We see amazing comebacks in the Champions League. We saw Barcelona produce one last season against Paris Saint-Germain. This time Barcelona were on the other end of a famous comeback. This time Roma producing it, and wonderful scenes at the Stadio Olimpico. But from a Barcelona point of view, very, very disappointing. They went 1-0 down early on in the game. Even then, you think that they're going to get through. 1-0 down at half time, and obviously they concede a penalty, 2-0, and then that late goal to make it 3-0, and Roma going through on away goals. Fantastic for them, but a lot to think about for Barcelona. This is the kind of thing that's happened to them too often in the Champions League over the last few seasons. They're running away with La Liga, they're in the final of the Copa del Rey, but in Europe they haven't made it past the quarter-final stage now for the last 3 seasons, and that for a team like Barcelona with players like Iniesta, Piqué, Messi, Busquets, it's not good enough. So what went wrong? What's been going wrong? Let's have a look at that. First of all, no Champions League means no treble either for Barcelona. There was talk of them winning the treble. As I say, they're going strong in La Liga and they have the Copa final ahead. No treble this time, no Clásico final or even a semi-final in the Champions League. That's something that perhaps we've been looking ahead, thinking this is the year. We're going to see a Clásico in the final of the Champions League, or at least in the semi-final. But again, we're not going to see it this time around. So, like I say, a lot to think about for Barcelona, and a lot of criticism for Leo Messi. He hasn't scored in the quarterfinals of the Champions League now for 5 years. But I think just to blame Messi is it's not fair. I think he's been carrying this team for much of the season, and we saw it again at the weekend against Leganés. He scores a hat-trick when most people wanted him to be rested, and yet he's needed for games like that. We saw it recently against Sevilla. He came off the bench and saved Barcelona when they were 2-0 down at Sanchez-Pizjuan, and kept their unbeaten record going for a bit longer, and it's still going in La Liga. It was still going in Europe, of course. They were unbeaten in La Liga and in the Champions League up until last night, but all came tumbling down, like I say. So I don't think it's fair to blame Messi. Yes, it wasn't his best game, but he was isolated. He was a frustrated figure for much of the night. He didn't have very good service, and in games like this against top teams and top coaches, you can't rely on one player. You need a little bit more. And Messi, the first thing that he said to Ernesto Valverde when Valverde joined Barcelona last summer was, "I need a team. I need a team around me to be able to function. To be able to produce my best." And Valverde, to his credit, has given him that in La Liga, but in the Champions League, it's not enough. And there's just perhaps a little bit of a lack of quality there. Obviously, Neymar left in the summer, and that was a big blow. There's no Xavi around at Camp Nou anymore. He was so important up until 2015, which is when Barcelona last won the Champions League. Coutinho arrived, but in the winter, but he's cup tied for the Champions League. Dembélé inexplicably left on the bench for both of these games. I thought that was a very surprising selection by Valverde not to pick Ousmane Dembélé as a starter in either of these games, and then bring him on for 5 minutes at the end last night. Really, when Barcelona were desperate for a goal, the change should have come sooner. I think he should have been in the team. I would have had him in the team for both of these games, particularly at home. And I think the 4-4-2 formation has made Barcelona perhaps more compact this season. Packing the midfield with more bodies, but it maybe hasn't helped them in attack. And I think that's where they've been relying so much upon Messi to pull it out. And in Europe, perhaps it's not good enough. Messi scored 6 times in the Champions League this season, which by his very high standards is not a huge amount of goals. Luis Suarez only scored once in the Champions League this season, that coming in the last game against Roma last week. And so if you look at those numbers, it tells you perhaps that Barcelona haven't been impressive enough in attack, and haven't been building enough, creating enough for their forward players. And 5 of Barcelona's goals in this competition this season have been own goals. A bizarre stat, really. And I think it just goes to show that perhaps Barcelona should have been doing more in attack and been relying very, very much upon Messi. He can't do it all on his own. That's a reality. Sergio Busquets is, speaking of really important players, Busquets was playing with a reinforced boot last night after a troublesome toe problem. And for me, when Busquets is missing, as he was at Sevilla recently, or when he's not quite right, as I didn't think he was last night, then Barcelona never looked like the same side to me. He's so important. And I think it's time that Barcelona thought about bringing in a backup for Busquets. He's one of the guys, along with Messi, who doesn't really have a reserve. When he's out, Barca have to change the formation. They never look right. He pretty much plays all the time when fit. And maybe that's why he's injured in the first place. And at this stage of the season, you need your key players to be fit and firing and at their best and available. And we've seen that at Barcelona over the last few seasons. The squad management hasn't been good enough, and if it gets to the end of the season and you're tired like that, it's all very well being clear in La Liga and the final of the Copa, but those games over the course of a season take a lot out of you. And we saw that a couple of seasons ago with Barcelona when they went out against Atletico Madrid. And they, in April, they just looked really, really tired. And I think fatigue played a part again last night. A lot of questions to be asked. Did Andres Iniesta need to play so many games, start so many games in the early part of the season? Why wasn't Philippe Coutinho, who's cup tied for the Champions League, why hasn't he been used in every single minute of every single game in La Liga and the Copa del Rey to allow the other players to rest? Why haven't some of the fringe players, had an opportunity? Was it the right decision to let, Rafinha, Mascherano, even Thuram, Deulofeu, was it the right decision to let them all leave in January when you've got a short squad? I don't know, perhaps those guys could have been a little bit useful in La Liga. You've got a big lead in La Liga. Also in the Copa del Rey, to be able to rest some of your starters for these big Champions League games when it matters most. Because now, even if Barcelona end the season with a domestic double of La Liga and the Copa del Rey, it's going to lose a lot of its sparkle if Real Madrid go on to win the Champions League for a 3rd season running. The Champions League has so much prestige, so much glamour, and it's really going to rub it in Barca's faces if if Real Madrid end up winning that 3rd Champions League in a row. So better squad management, I think, is another factor, and something Barcelona need to look at for next season. And also, I think they need to toughen up. In these games, we saw it against Atletico. They've been knocked out by Atletico twice over the last few seasons. Last season by Juventus. And even when they lost last season against Paris Saint-Germain, I feel that away from home, Barcelona can really be bullied. They can be intimidated a little bit. In a physical battle, there's the sense that you can still get to them. And, that's what happened. It happened recently at Sevilla as well. And Barcelona very much second best, physically not good enough. Got a player like Paulinho, who, perhaps isn't ideally suited to the purists style of how Barcelona should play football, but he is a guy who is ready-made for a physical battle. He wasn't involved at all last night, not even from the bench. So perhaps some strange choices from Valverde. And Valverde, even when he was at Athletic Club, his record away from home was questioned and often criticised. And I think look at the results this season in the Champions League away from home. They haven't been good enough. The 1-1 draw at Chelsea. The performance wasn't great, even though the result was okay. Obviously, last night against Roma was a disaster. Even in the group stages, though, 0-0 draws against Juventus and Olympiacos, 1-0 win away to Sporting. Not convincing away from home and not attacking enough. Gerard Piqué been playing through injury. Why was he allowed to go away and represent Spain in the international break recently? And turn out for La Roja when he probably needed a rest and he probably shouldn't have been playing at all. These are pertinent questions really, and disappointing for Barcelona, hugely disappointing. I think questions to be answered for Valverde as well. He stepped up from Athletic, which is a big club, to Barca, which is a huge club, and I think he needs to realise a little bit where he is now as well. Obviously, he's done excellent work in La Liga and in the Copa, and it's a great season if he wins those two trophies. But in the Champions League, against a team like Roma, who most of us considered to be the weakest team left in this competition, fairly or unfairly, Roma produced a great performance last night, but Barcelona should be knocking out Roma. Let's face it, it was considered to be a dream draw at this stage of the competition. So perhaps Valverde needs to be more positive, more proactive with his changes, with his team selections, less conservative, and he needs to step up. This is Barcelona. It's not Bilbao anymore, and the expectations are much higher at the Catalan club. I don't know. I think that's pretty much covered it. I wrote a piece today covering all of those things, and that's what I think. It's a disappointing end to the season ultimately for Barcelona. Even if they win La Liga, even if they win the Copa, and especially if Real Madrid go on to win the Champions League, it's going to be considered, rightly or wrongly, it's going to be considered perhaps not as successful a season, as it should be. So much to think about ahead of next season. Obviously, Andres Iniesta as well was in tears last night. He was absolutely distraught and may well have played his last Champions League game now for Barcelona, which is sad. The end of an era in itself. It's time for Barcelona to think about solutions and to look at all of these problems, that I've mentioned. They need to toughen up. They need to be more positive. Perhaps a formation change is necessary. Certainly need to get more out there attacking players. They need to give Messi help. They need to get back up in for Sergio Busquets. Perhaps that's something they should look at in the transfer market. Steven Nzonzi of Sevilla is one player who they've been interested in the past. He'd be a guy who could come in and provide backup when needed in that role. Something they definitely need to address. And rotation, tiredness, fatigue. They need a better bench, a stronger squad with better backup players, and they need to give more help to guys like Messi and Luis Suarez going forward. That's all for now, guys. Plenty to talk about. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave your comments down below with your own suggestions, your own thoughts and ideas. And please like the video if you enjoyed it, and it'd be great if you could subscribe as well. And we keep building this channel, and I keep doing these videos working from a cafe near you. Have a great day, guys, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.